It is OverDrive on this Friday. Those are the Rolling Stones. A little satisfaction for you. Gord Miller with Frankie Corrado here on this Friday. The captain, Brian Hayes, has put the stamp on it. He's licked the envelope and he's mailed it in. Good for him. OverDrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Lots going on today. The Olympic opening ceremony is getting underway. It is odd.
Yes.
Interesting. So first of all, the first opening ceremony that does not involve using the Olympic Stadium.
Why, Gord? Why would
I think they wanted to bring it to the people. They want to do it differently, so they're on boats on the River Seine, so more people can see it.
Okay, fair.
But it's pouring rain, which is not ideal.
And they were banking on this being like a beautiful Paris night, and it doesn't sound like they're getting that.
Well, it's still, I mean, Paris, even in the rain, is a beautiful city. There's an odd fashion show going on a bridge while they do this. And maybe, and someone pointed this out on social media today, that maybe the best image of the difference between Great Britain and France. So in 2012 in London, Gord Miller, Frankie Corrado, by the way, in London they had the Queen with James Bond, Daniel Craig, right? That famous scene, and then the skydiver looking like the Queen jumping out of the plane. Today in Paris they had a model dressed up as a decapitated Marie Antoinette.
Okay. I don't know who that is.
Well, that's Louis XVI's wife, the Queen, who was beheaded during the French Revolution.
Seems a bit grim for this occasion.
So the British kind of went one way, and the French went the other. It's very avant-garde. We don't know who will light the torch. We'll let you know who does that. It's a mystery person. They have like a person in a costume carrying the torch now, whose face is obscured.
And they'll reveal it when? Before or after?
Presumably when the torch is lit.
Okay.
So there have been some, of course, Muhammad Ali, famously in Atlanta in 1996. There have been some torch mishaps.
Vancouver? It didn't light in Vancouver, right?
One didn't light. In Seoul in 1988, they rehearsed the day before. It was a bit chilly in Seoul, and so they rehearsed the day before. They lit the cauldron and then extinguished it, but it was quite warm. And so birds nested in the cauldron.
Right.
And then when they lit it, the birds couldn't get out.
There was a few fatalities.
It was
that is unfortunate.
It was a large barbecue.
Yeah.
So, but hopefully that'll be avoided. And then the games themselves are kind of underway, and then they get underway in full tomorrow, like the full swing of things tomorrow. So, coming up on the show today, Steve Phillips, our baseball analyst, will talk about the Blue Jays, who start a series tonight against the defending World Series champion Texas Rangers, who are 5 games out of a wild card spot in the American League, but they've won 5 in a row. So they come in here hot. The Blue Jays got smoked yesterday.
That was ugly, and some of the sound bites afterwards were also ugly. Like it just doesn't. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it doesn't seem like there's pretty good vibes around that team. Like guys don't know who's leaving, guys don't know what direction things are going, and we've been talking about it from the outside for a long time. But to finally hear, I think it was Chris Bassett, like to hear it come from within. It's like, okay, we're not just talking ourselves in circles here. Like this is something they're actually feeling on the inside as well.
Of course. And then so you got Yusei Kikuchi pitching tonight, likely for the last time as a Blue Jay. He lives here full time.
He moved here. He's here all the time.
Lives in Toronto. One of the few Blue Jays who has ever lived here year round.
Yeah. Well, that's why he was having sushi the night that Ohtani was going to sign here, apparently.
So Steve Phillips will join us just after 5 o'clock. We'll talk about what the Blue Jays could expect to get with the baseball trade deadline coming on Tuesday. We'll talk to Cameron Dukes, the Argo quarterback, at 5:30. Argos take on Winnipeg tomorrow. Josh Lewenberg will join us just after 6 o'clock, talk about Canada's men's basketball team taking on Greece tomorrow in the first game of the Olympic men's tournament. And Lawrence Applebaum, the CEO of Golf Canada, our old pal, will join us from Calgary, where the CPKC Canadian Women's Open is going on in the smoke.
Yes.
Calgary, a lot of wildfire smoke.
We
talked about this yesterday. We're sending our thoughts to the people of Jasper, Alberta, and all of Alberta affected by wildfires. About 30% of the buildings in Jasper destroyed by fire.
That's horrible.
It's an awful thing. So we're thinking of them there. And we'll talk to Lawrence about the tournament, Brooke Henderson, everything else going on there. But coming up at 4:30, we'll talk to Josh Kloke of The Athletic, who's been covering Soccer Canada for a while. And we're going to start with this because it has been a day. At about 6 a.m. Local time today, the Canadian Olympic Committee announced that the head coach of the Canadian women's soccer team had been replaced. Bev Priestman had been relieved of her duties because it had become clear that she was likely aware of the activities that were going on with the spying. So we'll start with that because you played for a lot of good teams at high levels, right? You played major junior, you played in the NHL, you played in the American League. What's the one common thread that elite coaches have?
I would say they're very well prepared.
Yeah.
Elite coaches. And I would say they're great communicators.
Yeah. And they're control freaks.
Yeah. That could be part of their demise as well.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. But yes.
Yeah. So the idea that an assistant coach and an analyst on their own decided, and Brian Hayes and I talked about this yesterday, it just didn't pass muster that the analyst and the assistant coach decided, yeah, we're going to risk the massive sanctions and blowback that will go this. We're going to do it on our own. So the idea that she didn't know, strange credulity.
Crazy to me. And I almost thought of it this way too, Gord. What was worse? If Priestman was in on it, which apparently she is, or if she just didn't know that her underlings were doing this behind her back. Like you're negligent to the fact that you got people sabotaging your whole operation. Like great leadership that you don't know what's happening under you. So either way it went down, it was going to be a very bad look for her, and it is a bad look.
So David Shoemaker, the CEO of the Canadian Olympic Committee, came on and announced that Bev Priestman had been relieved of her duties and was being sent home. About 45 minutes later, Soccer Canada announced that they'd be holding a media conference to discuss things. And that's when the CEO, Kevin Blue, the new CEO, came on and discussed sort of his sudden immersion into the culture of soccer.
In my 4 months involved in global football, I'm new to global football, as you all know. And in my 4 months in the sport, one of the biggest takeaways I have is that, I guess, to the extent to which it's part of the culture globally to employ tactics that, might be in the ethical gray area in order to gain an edge. I've seen in 4 months, I've seen quite a lot of this. But despite this global context, I want to make something very, very clear. Behavior in the ethical gray area is completely unacceptable to Canadians. It's completely unacceptable to Canada Soccer and our organization. And frankly, to me personally, it's completely unacceptable as the leader of the organization. I'm hopeful that with the decision that we made last night, that following the press conference today, we can move forward and allow the focus to be on the players and the competition for the remainder of the Olympics at least, and so that the players have their opportunity to really be focused on the competition during the time of the Olympic Games.
So that was Kevin Blue. So I guess what they're trying to do is close the page, turn the page and close the chapter and say, okay, we're moving on now. Let's focus on the players. Easier said than done. First of all, it's not really an ethical gray area.
Yeah, you can't do it.
It's cheating. It's out and out cheating. Now, I saw some stuff. I got some replies on social media today saying, well, everyone does it. As I said, try that with the cops and you get pulled over for speeding. The fact is, if everyone did it, then by all means punish everyone. Prove it and punish them. But, Kevin Blue acknowledged that this probably went on during Copa America. There was allegations that it went on with, the Canadian men's team prior to CONCACAF qualifying against Honduras. The Hondurans stopped their practice because they thought there was a drone in the area. And I think that the danger of the everyone does it argument is, and it goes back to Ben Johnson, right? There was this thing that, well, everyone else was cheating.
Lance Armstrong.
But the fact is, not everyone else got caught. Ben Johnson got caught.
Right.
Red-handed. The unfortunate thing about Johnson was that we had the Dublin inquiry afterwards, which was this nationwide inquiry, this huge thing, and it blew the lid off everything. We saw the how, the when, the why of all the doping, how extensive it was, how widespread it was. And unfortunately, what stood out from it was the Charlie Francis comment. He was Ben Johnson's coach, who said, if you're not using steroids, put your starting blocks a meter back.
Right.
The Dublin inquiry showed that steroids worked. And so while in some countries, scientists were spending their time trying to develop better testing methods, a lot of other countries are going, wait, these things work. Let's find ways to make them less detectable. Let's find ways to skirt the system. And that was the unfortunate thing. So now, are we going to find out from this that lots of countries are doing it? It's effective. Now, is it effective? Didier Drogba was interviewed at the opening ceremony. He says it doesn't affect things on the pitch. And you did see, it's really important to say, Christine Sinclair released a statement today, and so did Stephanie Labbe, the goalkeeper for Canada, both gold medalists in 2021, saying that, hey, listen, we worked hard for our gold medal. What other people did doesn't affect us. Yes, that's very true. But in the eyes of the authorities, it's not.
Well, they didn't spearhead it, but they would have got information that otherwise they wouldn't have had if these things hadn't occurred. And you know what? I will say, for the players' point of view, they're not the ones that are going out there doing these things. So for them, it's like they are victims to a certain degree. They didn't ask for this. All they want to do is go compete in the Olympics. Like that's all they want to do.
Exactly.
Their stories should be front and center. Unfortunately for them, it's going to be, marred by the fact that this scandal is happening. And quite frankly, Gord, it is so embarrassing. The fact that they were using drones, doesn't matter who you're trying to cheat against, New Zealand, Argentina, I don't care. It's like there are plenty of examples of games and tape and film that you could watch and actually study for the test instead of having to cheat on the test. Like it reeks of laziness. And quite honestly, like it is a little bit pathetic.
So here's the thing. So we talked about Charlie Francis with Ben Johnson. So if a coach did something at the Olympics, tampered with another athlete's equipment, did something, the coach would be kicked out. The athlete would not in an individual sport. The problem is, in team sports, the coach is an active part of the team. In soccer, in basketball, in volleyball, sports like that, the coach is an active participant, right? They decide who's in the lineup, what substitutions are made, who takes penalty kicks. They decide strategy within the game. They call timeouts in volleyball and basketball and discuss strategy. Now they don't get a medal, but they're an active part of the team. And so in the eyes of the governing bodies, in this case the IOC and FIFA, what Bev Priestman did is reflective on the team because she's part of the team. So the IOC, and this is what happens, this is misunderstood a lot about the Olympics. The IOC runs the overall Olympics. They run the doping protocols, they run all the organizing. They don't run the sports.
Right, that would be FIFA.
The IHF runs the men's and women's hockey competition. Yeah. The IOC doesn't have the expertise to run the sport, so they outsource it, and they pay a pretty penny, by the way. The IHF gets a lot of its revenue every year from running the Olympic tournaments. That's a big source. They amortize it over 4 years, but they get a lot of money from that. Mm-hmm. And the IAAF, which runs track and field, gets a lot, and so does FIFA. So the IOC could look at this, and the IOC could say, this violates the Olympic spirit. And they have the authority to take action against athletes or teams that violate the Olympic spirit, doping, other issues. FIFA runs the competition. So what happens within the competition is FIFA's responsibility. Now, I don't think Canada will be kicked out. I don't think that'll happen.
They could be.
I don't think they would do that to the athletes. I think what we might see, and FIFA hasn't said anything yet, but based on the fact that we know this happened more than once in this event, based on the fact that we now are finding out it's happened in the past, Canada could, I think it's possible, be deducted the points for the win over New Zealand. They could lose the points in the standings.
That feels like a slap on the wrist. It feels like nothing.
But it is punitive for Canada, which has tough games remaining in its group to try to qualify for the knockout round.
If you had to make an argument, like if you were Canada and you had to make an argument to FIFA and the IOC saying, these are the reasons why you shouldn't kick us out of the tournament, how would you even build that argument? You got caught red-handed. Now it seems like it's been something that's been done in the past. Like why would FIFA and the IOC say we'll actually let you compete? We'll just give you a little slap on the wrist. Other than we feel bad for the athletes.
Yeah, the argument you'd make is don't punish the athletes. They had nothing to do with it. They didn't benefit. So don't punish them. Punish the leadership. And after the Olympics, if you want, sanction the people involved, sanction the federation. But this thing is kind of tumbled out of control. And part of the thing is that Soccer Canada and the COC, it feels like they're on a treadmill. Every time they try to catch up, it keeps going faster. Like, okay, we got caught spying once. No, it was actually twice. But only the analyst and the assistant coach know. No, the head coach knew. Oh, it happened here. It's happened more often. It's
actually may have led to a gold medal in 2021. Also, now maybe the men's team was doing it. And I do find it rich that, Herdman now is saying, I don't know anything about this, but I will, I'll comply and I'll answer all the questions that they need to be, they need answered. But it's like, listen, man, the cat's out of the bag. Like you're going to deny it now. Like everyone kind of knows, like this has been going on for a while. And I think it's even more embarrassing the fact that Canada for so long was such a poor soccer nation, and you're trying to cheat and you just got good like in the last couple of years.
Right.
Like it's just, I don't know. It's such a bad look, and it's so embarrassing.
So now the focus becomes, how widespread was it? How long did it go on? Who knew? So TFC head coach John Herdman was, of course, the head coach of both the Canadian national women's team and the men's team, and was asked at a TFC media availability what he knew about this.
I've always gone into Olympic Games, World Cups, big events with integrity in mind and the ability to compete at the highest level following the rules and processes. So, from my side, as I say, I'll help Canada soccer where I can with that review, but I'm highly confident that in my time as a head coach at an Olympic Games or World Cup, we've never been involved in any of those activities.
So that's a very careful parse there. At the World Cup and the Olympics, we were never involved in those activities. What about qualification? What about other events?
Sure.
But we'll take him at his word. But there's going to be an investigation here. Here's my concern about this. And it's a larger picture thing. You've got two young kids. You've got twins. I've got a teenage daughter. We teach them. You're gonna try it. I've tried to teach our kids values and ethics, right? So for me, it's the late John Wooden, the basketball legendary coach at UCLA. His 2 3s: don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses, right? Along with be empathetic, be kind, all those things. So those sort of basic things. And what you worry about is the creeping notion that people have that everything's dirty, that everyone cheats, that politicians all lie, that sports teams all cheat, that Olympic athletes are all dirty. That's not true. It's not true. The vast majority of Olympic athletes are clean. The vast majority of pro sports teams don't cheat.
They're tested.
Most politicians don't lie. Like
I'd argue on you on that.
There's a few. There's one that lies all the time, but
there's more than one that lie all the time.
There's one that really lies all the time. But this, I know lots of people in politics who are honorable, who want to make a difference. We know lots of people in pro sports who are honorable, that don't cheat, don't spy, don't do those things, and we know lots of Olympic athletes who have worked hard, stayed clean. But this idea that it's all dirty anyway, so it's kind of everyone for themselves, that's the danger to me. That's the...
Yeah, listen, there's soccer scandals. Like, I feel like every other year, Juventus in Italy has some kind of scandal, and they're getting reprimanded. But on the international stage, I don't know. I follow soccer enough. I don't hear a lot of drone issues. Like, World Cup comes around, I don't hear drone gate. Like, drone gate, spy gate, this is the first time I'm hearing of it, and it's Canada who's leading the way in this. Yeah,
you'd think if spying was that widespread and it was that common, we'd have heard more about it. Now, we certainly saw the Houston Astros with sign stealing, and there's long, people have thought that lots of teams are using electronic signals, or people in the outfield with binoculars, or behind, in the scoreboard at Fenway Park.
Yeah. Deflategate with the Patriots. Spygate with the Patriots.
Spygate with the Patriots. So, but this idea that if a lot of people do it, or if some people are doing it, it's okay. And it's not. We don't want our kids to think that. So if your kid comes home and says, lots of kids are cheating on the math test, it's not okay for you to cheat on the math test.
Right.
And I guess, it goes back to this, and Canadians are upset because they feel like they're being singled out. But they got caught.
Yeah, exactly. They were the ones that got caught. They were the ones that did it. And it reeks of laziness. And I think if Canadians are upset, and I don't want to speak for Canadians, but I feel like we have this notion that we're so polite and we're so nice and, we're so kind. It's
we don't
like,
fight back.
Yeah, and then now we're the ones that get caught cheating. Like, that's not a reflection of the country. That's a reflection of Soccer Canada and their poor judgment and their poor ethics. And quite frankly, just being lazy. Just being lazy, not wanting to dig into like actual game tape and footage and say, let's just spy on their practice.
But don't you think it's more than that? Isn't it, you touched on it earlier, the desire, Canada's kind of an emerging soccer nation to take the next step, we got to beat these big teams. What can we do to beat these big teams?
It feels like a reach. I don't know. I feel like the flying drone over the practice is such a reach, and it would be such a, I don't know, not a great justification by saying we just want to get better, we just want to be with those teams. No, you're cheating, and you're cheating, and it's premeditated, and you've planned it. Like, I don't really... I don't find a way, I don't find any kind of avenue of giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I've seen a little bit of that today too, where it's like, I'm not making a big deal out of this. Like, it is a big deal. They're cheating.
It's a worldwide...
And they got caught cheating.
It's a worldwide story. Like, this is being covered by newspapers and television stations all around the world. And it's being discussed widely on the internet. They got caught.
Yeah.
And so now the question is, what would be an appropriate punishment? What would be, because again, in the eyes of FIFA, this was not committed by the coaching staff. It was committed by the Canadian women's national soccer team, which is a single entity. They view this, FIFA would view it as a violation by a single entity.
You know what a fair punishment would be?
What's that?
You can allow the players, and not Bev Priestman, obviously, you can allow the players to compete with a new coach, but they probably can't be called Canada. Just like the Russians are not called Russia. So they're the IOC Canada. I don't know what you would want to do, but your athletes can still compete. But why should Canada get to compete in these Olympic Games after getting caught cheating like that?
I think losing the points against New Zealand would be enough.
Yeah?
That to me would be enough. And maybe even that's too harsh for me.
Really?
I think the real punishment should come after the Olympics. Once there's an investigation, some real sanctions should take place. Now, would that mean FIFA taking some World Cup games away from Canada in 2026? Like, that would be a harsh punishment.
I would say that would be more. I think that would be even more harsh, because this is the big thing. Like, this is going to be a moneymaker. It's going to generate so much for the cities that are hosting. It's going to do so much for the soccer program and the exposure and the eyes right here on our own soil. If you take that away, I think that's a way bigger punishment than just saying, hey, you guys can compete, but you can't be called Canada. That's a big punishment.
Well, something's going to happen. And I would have to think that, as a practical matter, Bev Priestman has probably finished coaching high-level soccer.
Yeah, what happens to Jesse Marsh now?
So
he's going to have to be investigated.
Well, and now he apparently was approached with the idea of this and rejected it. That's the initial indication, that he rejected this idea and kind of said, what have you guys been doing here?
Right.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Well, good for him if he put an end to it. Like, if it was happening before he got there and he's the one who put an end to it, he should be celebrated.
Yeah.
And he should have a long-standing job here, let's say, as long as he wants it, which I'm sure would have been the case anyways, because he's been a very good coach for this program already.
Now, the other thing that Kevin Blue addressed, the CEO of Soccer Canada, was the potential that Canada use drones at Copa America.
I'm aware of an instance of attempted drone usage during Copa America. My current understanding is that the fact pattern of that instance is significantly different than what occurred here, especially as it relates to the potential impact on competitive integrity. But, however, we're doing a review to specifically obtain a full understanding of these situations and what others may exist. I have spoken with our current head coach about the incident after it occurred, and I know that he has denounced it as a practice to his staff. That's what I can report to you now.
So, again, it's the toothpaste keeps coming out of the tube here, and it's. I think that they're going to have to. We're going to have Rick Westhead from TSN reported yesterday about how widespread and and long-term this has been ongoing. The contractors have been approached to do it. Staff members have been told to do it. There was actually an ad for a Soccer Canada position where being able to use a drone was a prerequisite. The assumption was it was to use a drone to record your own practice, not,
right? Or do social media content or anything like that.
Not someone else's practice.
Right.
So we're going to have to find out how widespread this was and how long it went on and who knew about it.
Yeah.
And that is going to be a painful process because, as you point out, it calls into question some of Canada's greatest accomplishments in international soccer.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal for a program on the men's side that is really up and coming, and for the women's side that wants to retain a gold medal and stay atop their position. So we'll see.
All right, Josh Kloke will join us. He's been covering Soccer Canada for quite a while, and he'll talk about the latest fallout, what he thought about today. On OverDrive, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score on TSN 1050, the TSN app, your home speakers, and TSN Plus. Little Olympic, the little country music on this OverDrive on Friday. The opening ceremony continuing in Paris. Tomorrow, swimming. Maggie McNeil's back in the pool. Summer McIntosh. The relays will start for the women. The gold medal races are tomorrow night. The men's basketball team starts against Greece tomorrow.
Here we go.
Yeah, so we'll have Josh Lewinberg will join us later to talk about Canada's preparations for that game. But joining us now to talk about what has unfortunately been the big story for Canada at the Olympics is the women's national team. And that's Josh Kloke is with us from The Athletic. And Josh has covered women's soccer for a long time and covered the men's national team in Soccer Canada for a while. And Josh, give us just a sense, first of all, of how big a story this is worldwide.
Worldwide, I've been told by people, on the ground in Paris, that this is dominating the conversation over there, right? And the games are kicking off now. So, more storylines will develop and eventually, I'm sure more scandals will emerge across the Olympic world. And, eventually there will be gold medals awarded and people will be talking about that. But right now, just given the timing and given the fact that this scandal occurred before the opening ceremonies, this is the talk of the Olympics right now. Especially considering, this is not just any team. We're talking about the reigning gold medal champions, right? And there's so many questions that stem from this, what are we calling it? Dronegate, Spygate. There's so many questions that emerge from this, not just with the women's team, but also with the men's team and their kind of rise to fame under John Herdman. So it's not just sort of a one and done story. It's one that's really, growing kind of by the minute. And I think that's why it's really dominating the conversation here and in Paris as well.
Cloak and Dagger, maybe you can put a little context on this for us. Like, there have been plenty of scandals in soccer. Like, I feel like every other year, Juventus is in some kind of scandal and they're getting relegated, they're getting punished. But I don't know. I just don't hear drones. Like, I don't hear drones at the Euro. I don't hear it at the World Cup. I don't hear Croatia, Portugal, Spain, Argentina. I've never heard it associated with any of those countries that are very good soccer countries. Like, is this something that happens and Canada's just the only one that got caught, or is this unique to Canada?
So you kind of touched on it there, Frankie. The word you used there was good. Like, I think, 10 years ago, we were not having calls on OverDrive talking about Canadian soccer, right? That the Canadian soccer program has evolved very quickly and the talent has very much eclipsed everything that's happening off the field. But I think if you are with, the Canadian national teams, you're realizing that as good as they've gotten and as much, world-class talent as they have at their disposal, the gap between doing and what some of the other teams in the world are doing, it's a pretty wide gulf. And I think to answer your question, no, this is not something that happens generally. Does it happen sometimes in international soccer, in club soccer? Yes. And like Frankie, this, having been a professional athlete, cheating is a very strong word, but like ways to gain an advantage over the competition that sometimes skirt that gray area of, whether or not things are ethically right, that happens often. In terms of drones and spying, it happens, I'm quite sure, but I don't know how often it happens. And with the best kind of teams in the world, the teams that I think Canada is aspiring to beat, I don't think it happens very often because those teams are just that good. I think what has happened here with Canada is, and this is me talking, I think some of the coaching staffs identified a lack of resources, a lack of, numbers just in terms of the coaching staff, and drones were used to kind of make up for that, right? If they can gain a tactical advantage by gaining some insight on the opposition and then using that to their advantage, that makes up for the fact that, as we are all well aware, Canada Soccer doesn't have, vast financial resources to have big coaching staffs and do other things that help teams get ahead. So I think that's what happened here. And I think that's probably the reason why other teams don't do it as much, because A, they're better, they have the talent, and B, they have the resources to kind of use more coaches. And
Josh, what was your takeaway this morning from Kevin Blue? We got the notification very late, very early in the morning with not much notice, that he would be holding a media availability. What were your takeaways from what he had to say today? Yeah,
there were three things that stuck out for me. First, he didn't dismiss Bev Priestman. I think going into that, and, a lot of us were scrambling this morning, I think there was some thought that if you're going to call a press conference on short notice, it's to announce something very drastic and to do it before the media are aware. So I think there was some thought that Bev Priestman would get dismissed on the spot. She was not. And that was done, I think, or that was prevented from happening because, Canada Soccer want to go through an external review of their process. So that was one thing. The second thing was that, drones were attempted to be used. Kevin Blue revealed that drones were attempted to be used during Copa America. And like Copa America, Canada's men's national team run through Copa America, that was such a feel-good story, right? Like 2023 was such a bad year for Canadian soccer. I think the public lost a lot of faith in Canadian soccer. And this is I think this really redeemed a lot of, people and redeemed a lot of feelings within the program. But then to have that come up, my understanding with that one is that, this is very likely a kind of a holdover from the John Herdman era, who attempted to use a drone. And then, that was quickly snuffed out by Jesse Marsh and the new coaching staff. So that's my understanding of how that happened. But I think that's still going to linger in terms of questions for Copa America and, whether Canada played by the book through such an inspiring tournament. And third, the big one for me in terms of takeaways is, that Kevin Blue identified that this is not a one-off thing. There are, systemic kind of unethical behavior that's been happening. And he used that word a few times, systemic, poor ethical behavior that's been occurring for years within Canada Soccer. That's a big one for me here. And I think what that reveals to me, and I think this is the question that the Canada Soccer really need to ask, is how much power did John Herdman and Bev Priestman have that went unchecked for so long? Right? Like Bev Priestman signed her extension in January this year when there was a real gray area in terms of who the leadership was with Canada Soccer, right? Kevin Blue takes over in February, just a few weeks after Bev Priestman signs a deal, after a pretty poor World Cup as well. So there's some questions there. And John Herdman, we know, got an 8-year deal, right? When he came on as head coach, that's an astronomically long time. That's a large contract. So how were these coaches able to have the kind of unchecked power that they did under previous leadership? Again, these are systemic challenges that I think Canada Soccer is still working to overcome.
How careful does Herdman have to be here when this investigation goes on? Because, I don't know, it doesn't sound like he's admitting any kind of guilt or knowing that it happened, but all signs point to him knowing that these things are happening, and they're going to dig in on this, and who knows what the outcome or the fallout will be. Like, how does Herdman have to approach this?
Yeah, very carefully. I think John Herdman is really going to come under the microscope here. I think John Herdman, what he did, during his time with Canada Soccer is going to come under the microscope. It wouldn't surprise me if his time at Toronto FC now comes under the microscope, right? Because this is such a gray area, using drones. And I know there's been a lot of people that have been talking online about the fact that, drone usage or drone expertise was part of the the job kind of, I guess, application for the women's national team assistant coaches. Drones are used throughout soccer to film your own training sessions. That's common practice. And so coaches have to know how to work drones and, work drone video. But it's when you start to use drones to kind of literally spy on other teams that, again, you get into that real ethical gray area, right? Bev Priestman and John Herdman are very, very close, right? She's very much a disciple of John Herdman. And, it wouldn't surprise me if John Herdman, if we start to learn more and more about, John Herdman's possible drone usage. It's too early to tell, without anything definitive, but it really wouldn't surprise me if he starts to come under the microscope, because he was with Canada Soccer for a very, very long time. There were teams that came to Canada during the 2022 World Cup qualifying and were concerned about drone usage. It wouldn't surprise me if Canada Soccer says, we really need to make sure ahead of 2026 we are operating as cleanly as possible. So if we really try to root out the problem here, if it doesn't stop at the women's national team and they try to go further back into what happened with the men's team as well.
Talking to Josh Kloke of The Athletic about what's going on with the Canadian women's national team. Josh, realistically, what do you think, what kind of sanctions could Canada expect short-term within this Olympic tournament and long-term?
So, first of all, my understanding is a decision from FIFA about how to proceed with the women's national team is expected very soon. Wouldn't surprise me if we get some kind of news on that tomorrow.
And Canada plays on Sunday, right, against France?
Right. And it's a huge game. So it wouldn't surprise me if we get a decision before then. I know Canada Soccer is very, very eager to get rolling with their independent review, right? Because I have to bring it up again. They are so focused, and rightly so, on making sure that stakeholders and sponsors feel they can trust Canada Soccer ahead of 2026. Right? I don't need to tell you, I don't need to tell anybody else. This has the potential to be the biggest event in Canadian sports history, hosting men's World Cup games, on home soil. That's huge. That has the potential to shift the sporting landscape. But if the Canadian public doesn't feel a sense of trust, if Canadian sponsors don't want to invest in Canada Soccer, they have a huge problem on their hands. So I think it's possible that things really, really get rolling. Let this linger throughout the term. Let questions linger, to the point that they become big picture questions. So, yeah, I guess to answer your question, things are going to start moving very, very quickly here, because I think if you're Canada Soccer, you would rather have the truth come out on your own terms than having more, reporters try to figure things out themselves, right?
And I guess the biggest shame out of all of this now is the players and their stories, which are usually front and center and very prominent, especially at the Olympic Games. That takes a back seat. And, I'm curious, I don't know if you've had any kind of, talking to the players or hearing what they're saying, but where do the players kind of fall into all of everything that's happening with this?
So the big one for me, just a few hours ago, Christine Sinclair, who, goes without saying, not only the best, Canadian women's soccer player of all time, one of the best Canadian athletes of all time. She's also, very reserved publicly, but for her to come out and say that in her 20 plus years of playing for the national team, she never once saw any drone footage. She was never exposed to any footage like that. That suggests that this is front of mind for players, and they want to be sure that, like you said, Frankie, their stories kind of, and their achievements don't get trampled on. Look, if you're doing this, and if you're filming other teams' training sessions, you would hope that you keep it between coaches and you make your own team selections based on that, and you don't share it with players. I also really would find it hard to believe that some players would not have seen footage at some point. But for Christine Sinclair to come out and say that, I think that's a really big indication that, players really want to have, like I said, their achievements held separate from, what John Herdman might have done, what Bev Priestman might have done. But no, it's very concerning. And the fact that players are trying to get out ahead of this so quickly suggests that they're concerned as well.
And they're certainly concerned about their legacy. That's the big thing, right? And separating the player's legacy from what coaches and administrators did at Soccer Canada is going to be the difficult thing to do. Josh, thanks for talking to us, and we'll keep following this story through the weekend and beyond.
All right. Thanks. Take care, guys.
That's Josh Kloke of The Athletic. And
Cloak and Dagger.
Cloak and Dagger, as you call him. FIFA's going to make an announcement here within 24 hours, likely, about what the sanctions are going to be. I think Canada tried to get ahead of it by saying Bev Priestman wouldn't coach against New Zealand. They sent the analyst home, the assistant coach home. I don't know that's going to satisfy FIFA.
Well, initially, Bev Priestman was just not going to coach the New Zealand game. And then it escalated to, actually, she's not going to be here.
So I guess FIFA would want to know, when did you know that Priestman knew that this had been going on?
And why didn't you just say she's gone right away? Why did you try and say, just the New Zealand game, she's not going to be a part of it?
We're going to take some other steps here. This is going to be an ongoing story, unfortunately, because there's a lot of good stuff coming. Tomorrow, Leila Ana Fernandez is playing. Bianca Andreescu's playing tennis. The women's rugby sevens are playing. We talked about, the men's basketball team, the women's swimmers. But right now, from a Canadian perspective, this story is overshadowing what's going on in Paris. Now, that said, once the games begin, once there's some results to talk about, there's medals to be won, that may go in the background. But
and hopefully the news cycle stops with this, Gord, right?
That's what Soccer Canada needs to do.
But it's not, because they're going to keep investigating, and then it's going to lead to this, and it's going to cascade. And unfortunately for everyone else, scandalous stuff tends to be front page stuff. But you're right. There's going to be so many great stories for Canadians throughout these Olympics, so we'll look forward to highlighting those as well.
Well, it comes Steve Phillips at the top of the hour to talk about the Blue Jays and the baseball trade deadline, which is coming up on Tuesday. That's all ahead on TSN's OverDrive, on TSN 1050, the app, your home speakers, and more. Coming up on 5 o'clock in Toronto on a beautiful Friday here in the city. Not so beautiful in Paris. Pouring rain there. They've got volunteers holding umbrellas over the dignitaries as they give the speeches.
Which, by the way, let's light the thing already. Not everyone has a personal umbrella holder guy.
I got to tell you, the opening ceremony of the Olympics, best watched on Fast Forward. Skim through the long parts.
Yeah,
watch the good parts.
This one was really weird. This is a weird opening ceremony.
Listen, you want a weird one? Google 1992 Albertville opening ceremonies. That was beyond weird.
Really?
That was, yeah.
Okay.
I think that was the one where the torch was lit by an archer. But some strange costumes. Well,
strange costumes in this one, too.
It was, once again, very avant-garde. Hey, the Jays made a trade. So Yimi Garcia, who was one of the top relievers available on the trade market, dealt to the Seattle Mariners. Jonatan Clase, a outfielder, I believe, isn't he?
Yeah, outfield prospect.
Outfield prospect. I think one service had him ranked 6th among Mariners prospects. Last year, the first player in the history of the minors to have a 20-70 season, 20 home runs and 70 stolen bases.
Okay.
Speed is his calling card.
Yeah.
So this is well timed for us, because in just a few minutes, we'll talk to Steve Phillips, our TSN baseball insider, about this deal.
He better be getting the scouting report ready.
I'm sure he's looking at him right now. Steve's on top of it.
I know.
He'll know. But,
he knows.
So that might have been the best card the Jays had to play among the players that you figure would be eligible. Exclude guys under control beyond this year.
Yeah.
Garcia would be a guy that was probably going to fetch the biggest return.
I guess between him and Kikuchi, right? Kikuchi's probably going to go. I guess, you figure the reliever could get in more often than Kikuchi, who's the starter on a new team. But it makes sense who they bring back. Someone with some potential to hit, to steal some bases, who has had good numbers in the minors. So, yeah, and this move was not a surprise. Yimi Garcia was going to get traded. This is nothing that came out of left field. And I think now we kind of get the first move for the Jays. We get to see what the market looks like and how that's been established. And that's kind of where things are going for the Jays now.
So it's on we go on this Mail-In Friday, brought to you by Boston Pizza. We got Frankie Corrado here in the studio, along with Gord Miller. And when we come back, Steve Phillips, our baseball insider, will talk with us on OverDrive on TSN 1050, on your home speakers, and on the TSN app. We're coming up on TSN